How we start our seeds and pot them on is crucial to giving them the best start, most especially those warm weather seeds. Because if you're like me and you don't have a greenhouse, then this early stage is crucial to getting those seeds and seedlings to thrive, because we want them to be as healthy as possible for when they actually go outside. Now, if you're like me and you're in a cool weather climate, it's going to be really difficult to get those plants to actually mature quick enough before your first frost. Most especially if you're growing something outside like peppers, those long stage big beef tomatoes, aubergines, basically anything that you're told needs a greenhouse or a polytunnel. Now, I don't have either of those. And so we really do need to give them the best start possible. And a lot of commercial composts leave an awful lot to be desired, simply because they're having to produce them so quickly that they're not actually being produced correctly. And then not only are they full of big chunks of things that haven't broken down yet, like wood chip, which as they break down will actually leach nutrients, but they're adding artificial fertilizers, which initially will feed your plants, but then you're left with nothing. And so your little seedlings and your plants start to suffer. So here I'm showing you what I've actually done to start my seeds and to pot on. Now, this is my compost that I started back in September. And what I'm showing you is a wireworm, because I've taken this from near the top of my compost heap. And this is now in the mesophilic stage, where all the animals are in there, including the worms, the wood lice, or the roly-polies as the Americans call them, and a different kind of biome. Because compost has two stages: the thermophilic stage, which is the early stage, which is what creates the heat, and then the cooling process, which is the mesophilic stage. Now, the top of this compost isn't finished yet, and it's got some roots in it and some other little bits. And so I've been sifting this out so that I can add it to something else. As you can see here, look, it's got a little bit of wood in it, which if I was putting this straight onto my beds, I wouldn't actually be worried about the wood so much because there's not a lot in it. But some of the roots that are in here are still viable. They haven't finished yet. And so that, once I've sifted it out, I would put straight back into the compost heap along with all the little creatures, because this is going into my potting mix. The sift I'm about to use is the same one that I use for my actual worm castings. And it's a little bit overkill because, as you can see, the holes in it are close together. And it doesn't need to be this close, but it's the only one that I've got because it's small. And this has been sat in here on this compost, and that's where this worm's come from. The inserted photos, you saw how many worms there were. When I got this compost, it was early morning and the top of the heap was actually frozen, and it took just lifting one small forkful for all these worms to be underneath it. I do not ever turn my heaps, literally never. I only ever remove the top layer, turn it over onto the rest of the heap and work down. So he can go back in there and I'll carry on sifting the rest. Now, I'm going to be adding into this my worm castings, and that's all I will do for mine. What you would do if you wanted to is add into this perlite and vermiculite. Now, they're two slightly different things, but they are volcanic rocks that are treated in slightly different ways, and all they do is add volume. Now, the one thing that perlite does is it will float on the top. You've got to be careful with it. It has no water retention ability, and it has no ability to hold nutrients, whereas vermiculite does. But you will find far less of this in commercial products. Now, you will have maybe seen in a different video of mine where I took cuttings and I used a cactus potting mix, and that has the perlite and the vermiculite in it because you want a nice fluffy medium so that your little seedlings can actually sit in there, put roots down, and it's free draining. Now normally I would add vermiculite into my potting mix, but in this instance I'm not going to, because this is going to be going straight out into my garden and I don't want that in my actual compost mix. My beds are actually raised beds and the compost that's in it is totally rubbish, and you might think I want the vermiculite in it, but what I'm putting in there is my worm castings. And my worm castings have the ability to hold water. And the thing about this is I've got to be careful how much worm castings I add into my compost, because as you saw, my compost already has worms in it and they're adding castings into there. You might think that the more castings you add, the better this is, but that's not the case. You can't plant straight into worm castings because whilst they have growth enhancers, they also have growth inhibitors. And so you don't want to put pure castings as a growth medium. You want to use a percentage, and that depends on the quality of the compost or soil that you've already got. Now for me, I know my compost is really good because I've made it and I know what's in it. And I know that I've got a huge amount of worms in there. So I'm only going to use 20%. So here, this is the compost that I've already sifted. It's only a small amount because at the moment I only need a small amount. And as you can see, it's light and fluffy and really dark. And then here is the bucket that I'm actually going to mix it all into. This is my worm castings, and you'll have seen in previous videos from my vermicomposting playlist that I've already sifted this out. Here's a little baby worm that I've missed. I did say in those previous videos, because this is from my long-term storage. I was having issues with the humidity and it was already retaining quite a lot of moisture. So I didn't sift these when I first took them out of the tower. And so there was a lot of cocoons and wisps in there, and they will fall through my sift. So I'm just going to get a little pot to put this little worm in, and he'll go back into my tower. And then all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to weigh all this out by volume, so I know exactly what I'm doing with it. And so I'm going to get a jug, and in this jug we're just going to lightly pack it. And like I said, I'm going to use 5 parts of my own compost to 1 part of the actual worm castings. Now obviously the more compost you have, the bigger vessel you can use. I'm just using this because I've only got a small amount in here, and it turned out I had just the right amount. And so then on to my 1 part of worm castings. You can see how dark my compost is compared to my worm castings, which to me always look really, really dark until I've just compared it to my actual compost. And then I'm going to give that a mix through. And this is all I'm going to be using for actually potting on and seed starting. And I will just keep mixing up now for the rest of the season until I've used up what I've got. And so this will be spread out in little increments through my garden, and the rest of my worm castings will be used as a tea or to be spread through my containers. So I hope you found this useful. I hope it gives you some ideas as to how you use yours. But once you've got this base mix, you can tailor it to your own needs. I hope you'll like, subscribe, and come back for the next instalments of seed starting and how to transplant and pot on. Thanks for being here. Bye for now.